Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. After decades of buffers that bust, AppSec needs secure code it can trust. No more pointers to track or a memory hack, so please wish happy birthday to Rust. Which means this week, we talk with Ray Banggo about LLMs, secure code, supply chains, and why so much of those topics depend on trust. Borrow something and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Think your terminal emulation is secure? Think again. Passwords and firewalls alone won't protect you. Cyber threats are evolving, and so should your security. Rocket Secure Host Access gives you phishing-resistant, password-free protection with leading-edge encryption. Your mission-critical systems deserve more than good enough. Secure your green screen access and stay ahead of the threat. Rocket Secure Host Access. The future of TE is now. Learn more at securityweekly.com/rocketsoftware. This is episode 330, recorded May 12th, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello again, John.
Hello again. I am here. Yes, that is true.
You are here. That is true. You could also be at Identiverse 2025 if you so wished. It's returning to Las Vegas this June 3rd through 6th. Hear from over, count these numbers, 250 expert speakers, connect with 3,000 plus identity security professionals across 4 days covering the latest identity security trends. Take part in hands-on workshops and explore, this is my favorite part every time I read this, the brand new non-human identity pavilion. It's Toaster Town. Register now and save 25% with code IDV25-SecurityWeekly at securityweekly.com/IDV2025. It's a lot of dashes and slashes. Ray is an experienced technologist focused on building resilient and secure products that delight users and drive company impact. He's passionate about great user experiences, building secure systems, empowering communities with great technology, and understanding how to help companies embrace AI and cybersecurity in a responsible manner. Hello, Ray. Thank you for joining us.
No, that's a mouthful, huh?
It's a mouthful, but it sounds like you're working on some good stuff, or at least you're going to have job security for a while, because AI is going to be writing code along with all of the human developers. And I think you spend a lot of your day looking at code, doing code reviews. Maybe tell us a little bit about the story of a code review, and we'll use that as a departure to figure out, can we have Ray or can we have Ray and AI doing this in the future?
I hope it's Ray and AI. That's what I would really love. Code reviews they're arduous. I know that a lot of folks can see them as like tedious because you're trying to find that needle in the haystack of what a threat actor can take advantage of. And I've never met a developer that doesn't want to write good code. That's the one thing I'm going to say. Never met one yet that didn't want to do right. But invariably, that's the one thing about humans. We do our best, and sometimes we don't get it right, and that's okay. That's just part of the normal process. Although I just want you to know, every bit of code I've ever written has been 100% bug-free and security perfect. So I just want to make sure.
We'll be posting your GitHub later. Yes.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks. Let's go. I love that extra attention, But no, I think there's so much potential when it comes to AI, both in terms of assisting developers build really creative solutions, but also helping developers build secure solutions. It's just a matter of when we will get to that point where everybody feels a certain level of trust. And I think trust is the key word here. Trust not only in the code that we're building, but trust in the systems that we're using to auto-generate code and validate that code.
And that's also what I want to dive into a bit more, because I do agree, developers have been using LLMs, they've been using coding assistants. I will still always say they're the one of the most helpful tab completions out there, but they're super clippy. But that's more code that ostensibly needs more code review, because do we trust the human? Do we trust the LLM to create the secure code? And Ray, I think you spend a lot of your day just doing that code review, or looking at, worrying about the AppSec side of thing. Is that, do I trust this code? Do I trust where this package comes from? When developers start using LLMs, is there actually, what new concern is there? And the reason I'm asking that is everybody loves their LLMs. They love to hype it. But are we really looking at new threat scenarios, threat models? Or is this just really the biggest, newest aspect is just more code to do the manual reviews that maybe haven't been so successful in the past? And that's what we're just still struggling with, just trying to do less effective things against a larger volume of things to be less effective against. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic. What's your reaction there?
It's an interesting conundrum we're in, because companies obviously want to iterate faster. We've all heard about companies saying that AI will be generating the bulk of their code. I know people are concerned about their jobs and what their opportunities will be in the future. And so when you look at, and when you listen to Satya Nadella or Mark Zuckerberg talk about AI is already generating 30% of their code, and you're talking about massive companies, massive tech companies, that's pretty impressive. So the horse has left the barn already. So it's happening. And as software developers, we need to evolve. I think that's one of the big things that's going to kind of be a shocker for a lot of folks. We need to evolve as professionals and figure out ways to partner with AI-centric solutions. And I feel like one of the things that I always loved about software development is that I had this sense of control. Everything I built, I knew why something got built. And it was that sense of control that made me feel like I'm producing value, and that I have a sense of solace that the things are going to work in the way that I expect. When you're talking about a system that's being auto-generated for you, you lose that sense of control. And so you have to figure out what are the guardrails that you can put in place to continue to give you that sense of solace while still building resilient systems. And I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. So I think this is where that level of trust continues. And I keep using the word trust. I think that level of trust that people are looking for, they want to know that what's being produced is safe and it's going to be reliable. So, John, you were going to say something.
So I'll start with a mini anecdote without going into details. We recently lost, I'll say, many hours at work trying to track down a compiler optimization bug in our favorite language, where basically we changed the size of a structure and the compiler went, aha, I can fix that. And our performance dropped by a very significant amount. So the reason I'm saying that is we don't always know what's happening when we go to, we write code and what actually ends up on the box. There's so much stuff going on. But bringing that back with trust. So we trusted that compiler. Like, we've been using this for years. It's established language, all those wonderful things. We think we trust it. But I think what's going on over the last, at least what we've covered on the show over the last year or so, is a lot of what these, see if I can be a little more specific in my words, LLMs are generating is not always trustworthy, particularly if you start doing math, like try to do like net mask math in there. No, bad. But like, so there's some things we know it can do very well. It can do, code spell checking usually pretty well. But I think the thing is we're trying to figure out what is that level of trust? How do we better understand what we can trust without running into the wall continuously? And I don't know, I'm curious about your thoughts or perspectives around that, right? It's like, I agree with you on trust, right? Particularly in security in general, but how do we figure out where is that specific, what do we trust and what do we not?
That's a great analogy, by the way. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's such a great example of how we've trusted systems for a very long time. So you're trusting a compiler, but here's the thing. I think the difference from what I'm seeing, from what I'm talking about and from what you're talking about, is that you're generating the code yourself, and then you're trusting a compiler to put it together. That's what the compilers do. They put it together. They're not spitting out the code for you. they're going to spit out bytecode, right? But ultimately, you're creating the code, you're putting it through a compiler, and there's an outcome. My concern comes around these LLMs and these systems that leverage the LLMs to generate all the code. And then all the code is out there, and we never look at that. So imagine your systems that are probably very complex, right? And you're just assuming that this LLM is going to come out with really reliable, well-structured code that everybody in your team is going to know, and you won't. There's just no way. And especially when you start talking about companies at the scale of a Microsoft or a Meta, there's no way everybody's going to know. So at what point do you have that level of trust that the code that's being spit out by these LLMs is trustworthy? A compiler error, that could be anything from there was a version update that happened, and that version update, they changed something in the way that they were converting stuff. That's why if you look at even in browsers, Google made such a strong push around performance that even in the tools that are there, they, the browser tools, they have now whole things on page rendering performance and JavaScript load time and all these things. Why? Because every time a JavaScript engine version came out or a DOM rendering engine version came out, something was tweaked and performance went down. And so you were able to track it down.
And one of the things, I want to jump in on that because there's an aspect of trust, also a little bit of just trusting what we hear too. Like Satya Nadella says, 30% of the code, but I would also question, I'd take that with a grain of salt in the sense of there's also just boilerplate code that gets set up. Here is the skeleton of a new package, and that could be auto-generated, but a design isn't coming out of that necessarily. And, Zuckerberg only has fewer than 3 friends, so who even knows who he talks to these days?
Right.
But the point reason I'm bringing that up is even the compiler that John is describing is deterministic. It's going to re-optimize and mangle that code in the same way every time. It's just going to do it perhaps in an unsurprising way for that team. And even like the Chrome developer tools you're describing, because changes to JavaScript, even CSS, can hit performance so badly, but those are going to be deterministic, whereas the LLM generating code, I'm loving my word of the day, is deterministic, is non-deterministic, or it might be a bit off. Or to go back to just the math, NetMask, or things like that, what it's producing, there's also, where I'm going with this is the idea of a design. A software design, I don't think can come out of an LLM, and it's the design that are more meaningful security problems or potential for business logic flaws, things like that. Because I think if we have cross-site scripting, SQL injection, we've already got linters. So I'm hoping we're not just throwing LLMs to replace all of the fancy greps we have, but LLMs are maybe messing up business logic. And that's where I'm curious. Yeah. The same problem I want to say holds true even for human-generated code. So if you're, Ray, if you're looking at code, how are you trying to figure out, does this have business logic? Is this design bad? And I want to use that as maybe a bit of a more specific definition for like a code review or insecure code from that perspective.
Yeah, and it is a great point, and especially the non-deterministic aspect of it. And you're right. It's these large language models they're only as good as their last training date. That's probably the best way to describe it. And so, they always say that it's when you use something. There was a way that they phrased it, and I'm sorry I forgot it, but basically what it meant was whenever you search for something, let's say in ChatGPT or in Claude or in Gemini, whatever it is, you're only going to find relevant results up to the date of its last training. And so if you use, ChatGPT for X, right? It's going to be up to whatever last date they trained it to, because it's not a continuous retraining from what I understand. They train the model, they publish it, and then they go on to the next iteration of the model. And from a software development perspective, you would hope that they capture so many things that have historical relevance from a software development perspective. But there's things that are evolving all the time. And so you hope that the evolution of these models it stays in tune with what software developers are thinking about, and especially as software developers are getting more creative using AI solutions themselves to build solutions. So it's this whole really weird. What was that movie where they were in a recurring dream
Inception,
with Leonardo
of course.
DiCaprio? Inception.
That's the
so maybe
yes, that's the
maybe
go-to.
we're in an Inception model here. So so
I always think we're in the model of Memento, where we keep creating something, then forgetting we created linters, forgetting we created SaaS tools, forgetting that we create all these things, and now we're just going to replace it all with AI. So, Guy Pearce, come on, you need to come save us. But what you're describing there, Ray, is very much about that developer side of things, which makes sense. And I'll quickly concede that I've seen developers using this. It's an assistant to them. And what I've throughout the year, so this isn't just this this particular segment where we're trying to pick on Ray to solve this problem, but the past several months, we've been looking for where the context of LLMs, specifically as an AI, LLMs are helping us with security, and that's where I'm curious. Like if we pretend that there's such a thing as a prompt engineer, could we just replace you, Ray, with the prompt suffix comma, but make it secure, as all of the developers are writing code? Why is that going to fail? Like, maybe we'll just turn this around and sort of defend your job. Or what is it that's secure? Maybe this is it. What does a good secure code review look like? What are you focusing on?
Yeah. Well, if I ever get to the point where I have to defend my job on that, I swear I'm just going to become a plumber. I mean, I have very good friends of mine that run plumbing businesses, and they're doing amazing. And AI will never replace them. I can tell we were talking about that with them. But from a code review perspective, I think there is business logic, and there's conversations that have to be had to understand how an application truly flows. That AI. Yeah, I may or may not be able to get to that point. I don't know. Could it be 10 years from now where you can have true conversational AI where, they talk about it now where you can pull up the phone right now and have a conversation? Okay, that's great. But can it truly understand the inner workings of an application and how data goes from one point to the next and all the net results that come out of that? If you input the number 5 into a form field, what does that mean? I'm just throwing that out, right? What does it mean? What does it mean contextually to the application and all the flow all the way down until it touches the database and then interacts with a third-party API and then pulls back data? And let's say it's GIS data. That would it know what to do and how to properly sanitize it and how to take that data all the way through and be able to act on it in the way that businesses expect. I think for the junior to maybe medium level software developer, I think AI is becoming really, really good. I don't like to scare people, but I've seen what GitHub Copilot can produce. I've gone ahead and used Gemini to create some of the more basic type of coding stuff, and the code looks pretty darn good. But then you got to get to the point of saying, well, is it good structurally, and then does that mean it's secure? And so that's the next step. And the one thing that I haven't seen is where I can feel 100% trust that the code is secure. Maybe that's just because I haven't run it through DAS tools yet or SAS tools. Maybe we need to get to that point. I don't know if it's able to load up dependencies. So for example, there was what did I do? I created an app and I just said, I want to create a to-do app using this, and it went ahead and scaffolded up a whole to-do app using React and Next.js and all these different components, right? But did it tell me that it was a secure app? No. Could I have run it through a SAS scan or an SCA scan and maybe found things that were insecure? If I had to guess, I'd probably say yeah, because it's probably ingesting a lot of code that was consumed over the internet. I would venture to say Stack Overflow was probably used quite a bit. There's been, I've seen articles where they talk about the correlation between Stack Overflow traffic going down and the use of ChatGPT. So could there have yeah, you could have used that.
Right. Yeah. The inputs, and it's kind of a bit of a callback to the train. What is it trained on? We don't have 100% secure code, and nor is that, I think, even a reasonable goal. We want to minimize flaws, get them down to zero, but we have to acknowledge they're going to happen. There's an aspect you mentioned there too, and I'll be curious to get maybe some of John's thoughts on this too, about who's using the coding tool in terms of junior developer, senior developer, and how they're using it. Because I can't remember, and I just forgot what the phrase you said, but you were basically speaking to the design of a system. How is this put together? And we, as on the AppSec side, think about that similarly in the sense of, is this secure? That's kind of the cheesy phrase, but we're thinking, how do these different components talk to each other? How does this data go through? And maybe I guess, question for both of you, maybe start with John. How have you seen the seniority of the consumer of that LLM change its expectations, or change either the type of code that is being used to generate, or the type of security concerns or considerations that you're bringing into it?
Actually, excuse me. We actually there was a paper written on this, I want to say about a year and a half ago, which I think aligns with what I've seen. So what that paper was saying, for what I remember, was the difference between junior and senior developers using the tools is the senior developer will recognize when the bot is wrong and fix it. Whereas the junior doesn't have the experience to know where to look or know where the critical part of that application is, or that block of code. I'd say day to day, from my experience in and outside of my day job, to sort of anonymize things here a little bit, I'm seeing it used across multiple levels of seniority. I'm hearing of executives using it literally for vibe coding, which is sort of amazing. I'm talking about senior executives, very senior executives. But I think there's a difference between when we're playing like, hey, I've got a few minutes, let me see if I can do this with the LLM instead, versus I'm actually on deadline. I'm trying to get some production code done. Can I trust the tool to do it? And I think that's sort of I would say more for the former case than the latter case.
Yeah, I'm curious,
I
Ray.
think,
how does that resonate with you?
I think you hit it right on the head. What you said, John, I'm sitting here saying, yeah, it's almost like a scary statement when I hear that senior executives are vibe coding and just putting stuff out. It just goes back to that whole thing where this person said, I went vibe coding and I replicated this product and I put it out there, and then they got a lot of unwanted attention, right? And this was on Twitter. I forgot the name of it, but the unwanted attention, especially from the security aspect. They actually had to come back and say, I don't understand why everybody doesn't like vibe coding, but hey, listen, I don't understand how to fix this. Okay, this is a great example of where I think there's a place to use tools. I would love nothing more for something to be able to generate code. I think that's cool. And we've had code generators for decades. Just you said it earlier, Mike. We have. But the difference is that there was a level of education where even junior developers coming out of universities had a certain level of understanding of programming logic, coding techniques, architecture, reliability, that they could look at the code and say, oh, I understand what's going on here. And the one thing I will say, and when I worked at Veracode, I was talking to a professor at Tufts University who told me that one of the challenges he sees with education is that the kids are in such a hurry to get out of school and they're rushing through programs that they're not getting the foundational components they need to be successful. And a lot of times they're having to learn that on the job, which makes it different. And especially from the security lens, nobody's teaching security at universities. If you look, you might see a lot of programs coming out now because security is kind of like this cool thing. But who's doing that? You're doing like Western Governors University, Arizona State University Online, Purdue Global. And if you look at who they're targeting people who already have an established career. They're not targeting the people who are first going into school and learning these concepts. So security is not being taught as a first-class citizen in school. It's kind of like an afterthought. Certain programs like the University of Central Florida, they have a great program for that. They work with their students, and that's why they have the top team for cyber defense. But you come out of there and these kids don't know anything about security. They don't even think about it. They just want to build. They're like, oh no, I just want to code. And I've had colleagues who have said, I don't want to know, and I'm going to use a kind of a terse term. I don't want to know any of this crap. I just want to build. You guys handle the security. And you're like, okay, but that's not the way it works.
And that's actually a great setup for the question I wanted to ask, because I know I'm always worried about going into the direction of developers don't care about security, because I think that's overly dismissive. But what you're pointing out is maybe they aren't trained, or they have different priorities. But when you're going into the secure code review, have you seen, when you're talking to the humans who wrote the code, has the way that you're talking about, here is what explaining the problem, here's what the problem was, here's one way that we could potentially fix it, are there other ways you can think of? Have those types of discussions as the follow-up from a code review changed over the last couple of years, either with or without AI, or even just how you've seen especially junior devs being educated or taught in this area?
So not having worked with many junior devs recently, I will say that a lot of folks, the majority of folks that I've talked to about security issues in their code have been receptive to at least fixing it. The understanding side of it, it just depends on how much time they have available to sit down with you. And if you're able to explain it to them in a way that doesn't consume a lot of their cycles and that just gets them going, that's great. The other part of it is that a lot of the developers that I've spoken to, when it comes to incorporating tools into their CI/CD pipeline, it's viewed as friction. Why? Because the release cycles they've increased. Think back, and I'm going to date myself, but look, I coded in traditional waterfall days, and we'd have maybe one release cycle in a week. Everybody would code, and then you'd have a formal QA process, and then come back, and then code, fix, and then you'd have a release, right? Now it's like you're releasing 1, 2, 4 times a day. And a lot of that is dependent on automated tools that kind of help you bridge those gaps. And anything that adds friction, a SaaS tool, an SCA tool, and I saw this at Veracode. A lot of the developers would view that as friction. It's not that the tool is any slower, but to them, even adding 30 minutes to a timeline is challenging. And this is across any vendor. You talk to any vendor of tooling, and they say the same exact thing. One of the things that I loved that Veracode had, for example, was the ability to inspect code on the fly. So as the developer is coding and building out logic streams, they had a plugin that could plug in, if I'm correct, into Visual Studio Code that could analyze code and say, hey, this could be a potential issue for you. And this is where I think things like AI come in that could be very beneficial. How do you get to the point where these things are incorporated into the tools? And I'm sorry about my pup in the back, so hopefully you don't hear too, she gets loud. But those are things that add benefit ahead of time. They try to kind of nip things at the bud versus waiting till you're trying to push something out that increases friction. Again, hopefully those tools will, hopefully those types of things, once they get incorporated, will also increase education and demonstrate patterns that the developers can lean on and say, oh, okay, I understand why this AI component is saying this is secure. Let me not do that again.
Yeah, and it's that we would love to see just more of that little red squiggle under your, we see that for grammar mistakes, for misspellings. It'd be lovely to see that for areas of like functions, like broad areas of code, and that feedback. And to me, what is appealing is to get that feedback loop to the developer that indicates, this is a code smell. Here's a pattern that has potential problems to it, and hopefully a little bit of here's why, so they can understand. And then, it's human reinforcement learning. They see that, fix it here, but then hopefully apply it somewhere else. And it sounds like a lot of it is just bringing the tools, LLMs, into the developer's side of the house, into their experience. which is good. It just means that the AppSec side, it still feels like we, I don't know, are still struggling to find an LLM as an assistant and more as the antagonist, where we just have to figure out what's being built, how do we trust it. And before we beat that part of that poor dead horse, you've been mentioning a couple times education, Ray, and just training. What kind of aspect there would you hope for developers today in the age of LLMs or the age of, security is important? Do we just need to be talking more about the OWASP Top 10? Is there something that's been more or less successful that you've seen when you've worked with developers and educated on security topics?
I think the OWASP Top 10 is great. The project itself continues to be my go-to resource for so many things that I'm constantly learning and helping to evolve my skills. What I'd like to, but one thing I think is kind of bridging that a little bit. The OWASP Top 10 is very deep. It's very terse. It's very hard for folks to really dig into, and maybe one of the things that we need to kind of step back of is say, ensure that these developers, especially junior developers, truly understand the full capabilities of a framework. What are the things that the framework provides that offers some level of security? Does the framework provide anything from, data binding to sanitization to whatever it is? Some of these frameworks have gotten really good. They're trying to get ahead of the game, right? They're trying to avoid a lot of the patterns that have traditionally bitten developers when it comes to JavaScript development. And we're seeing so much JavaScript on the server side now that it'd be great to fully understand that. I would love AI to really dig a little bit deeper into things like NPM packages and PyPy packages and truly understand what's happening behind the scenes. And I don't know, for all intents, provide some level of a Swagger file or something like that a developer can lean on and say, oh, I understand what's going on in here, because I think we are too quick to consume things to make our life easier. And sometimes it's at the expense of reliability and security. So from an education perspective, we have to lower what we think is the bar to at least ensuring that they understand what the capabilities of the things that they're using are. And then, people are going to self-select into the security side of the thing. They're going to say, I want to be a security champion. I want to look like me. I wanted to go into security. That's exactly what I did. I was a software developer for a long time, and I self-selected in security. So I started going way past what it was to just do secure code or code reviews. I'm a principal penetration tester at Verizon. So I go in there and poke around at apps and try to break them if I can to help kind of build more resiliency. And I think the other thing is communication skills. That's, if I had to say that this is an important component, is in technology, I've found that so many folks, not a lot, but they're enough, they have a hard time communicating with each other. Maybe it's because they're introverted, maybe because they just haven't had that skills training. And it'd be great to be able to help folks understand.
Everyone loves communicating too, even the puppy. Yeah.
Yeah, she's definitely communicating with somebody at the door right now, probably. So, but yeah, the more that she can communicate out there, the safer we are at our house, basically. Anyways, I think if people were able to communicate with each other and feel that sense of confidence that they're able to convey what their concerns are, and be able to get actionable feedback, something that they feel like, oh, okay, this person really has a vested interest in my success, that's going to be a positive component to it as well.
I love that. And we're coming up near the end. So I think that's also just a great sentiment for us to land on, in the sense of that communication and explain what you were trying to do, whether it was this was the design that I was trying to put together, or this was the reasoning behind my choice of this design, this function pattern, or this implementation. And that's where you can have that conversation around, oh, but from the security angle, these are some consequences here. In that 4-question threat modeling framework, here's what could go wrong, or here's the worst that could happen. Have you considered that? And that feels to me like still the realm of human conversations, even though, as you pointed out, Ray, it's not necessarily an instinct that everybody has to be able to explain themselves succinctly, explain themselves well. So still something for, including me, as people listening to this, can understand and have to work on.
Sure.
But I think, as we wrap up here, one thing that we always get our guests to communicate for us, Ray, is to describe application security in 3 words. So what's your AppSec in 3 words for us today?
Sure. So I think the first one is going to be education. You got to constantly, be learning both new coding techniques. Notice I'm not even saying secure coding techniques. New coding techniques.
Fair.
And then trying to understand how security can be applied to that. I think we all have to evolve from a software development perspective. AI is here to stay. And the more that you can dig into it and say, how do we capitalize on this emerging space to make our lives easier when we're building these systems, the better it's going to be for us, because it's going to help us identify where we fit into the narrative. And then the last thing is trust. I don't blindly trust new technologies. I never have. I always like to kind of take it slow. Some people like to be at the very front of the wave. They're riding that big pipeline like Bodhi did, and Point Break. That's just not me. I'm okay with being on my paddleboard. Going here slowly and making sure that I feel the code is going to be something that I can produce and I can trust and I can feel confident that it's going to help the users. So I would say education, evolution, and trust.
Education, evolution, trust, and maybe Johnny Utah as well. But that's just call back to your Point Break. But I want to say thank you, Ray, for illuminating and explaining better perhaps than an AI can do a lot of just the reasons that trust is important and the concerns that you have, as well as the future that you're looking forward to. Appreciate that.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you once again, Ray. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please do stick around for 2 sponsored interviews recorded at RSAC conference last month. First up, we'll have LastPass CEO Karim Tuba, who describes how the increasing adoption of SaaS requires a smarter and more streamlined approach to the secure access experience. Then next, we'll have Oligo Security co-founder and CTO Gal Elbaz explains the emerging category of cloud application detection and response. So start throwing that into your vendor watch lists, and why the focus of CADR on the application level will be so beneficial, but perhaps not as beneficial as having Ray Banggo go and pen test all of your applications. Please remember to subscribe, check out the show notes, share us on the socials, and speaking of taking time, check out Time Lapse by Calax. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.
Welcome back to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview is my good friend, Karim Tuba, Chief Executive Officer at LastPass. Karim, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Obviously, the last time you and I spoke at any length was when you were still at Kenna and the whole acquisition by Cisco. Now you're at LastPass.
Correct.
So let's talk identity for a second, right? As I look at the identity market and its transformation over the years, the one thing I'd always notice is that identity was very segmented. We had IDPs and identity access management. We had single sign-on solutions. We had PIMs and PAMs and password. It was very segregated. I've started to see some of the market start to consolidate in certain areas. I mean, Thoma Bravo accelerated some interesting stuff, I think, in the market. But where are we from the state of identity and access? Where are we on like the holistic kind of view first?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you think about what we've sort of been observing in the broader based market, there has been a lot of that consolidation you spoke of. And that consolidation is driven through 2 things. It's driven by some roll-ups that have happened in various through acquisition vehicles, but also the understanding of the super large players, the Microsoft, the Oktas, the CyberArks of the world, that, if they started as an IDP, they extended out with IGC, IGA, they extended out with SSO, MFA, because they recognize the value of consolidating those.
Right.
And so what you've started to see is a consolidation, which is a very good thing generally as an industry. there's a little bit of a downside to the consolidation in that it does create some challenges for it helps a lot of the larger organizations, but in the middle and small to medium sized businesses, it does create some challenges because that rule that you and I have talked about in the past, that long tail of features oftentimes aren't needed or get utilized. So the more you consolidate, the more you put on, but you have to think about it through the lens of which market segment are you converging.
Right.
So generally consolidation is good. You just have to be thoughtful at what type of the sector you're focused on.
Right. So great for the enterprise, have big, massive identity platforms and environments.
Correct.
Maybe not as good for the small to medium business that doesn't have a lot of users, maybe not can use all those features or need all those
Correct.
features.
And it's even beyond that. You know, there's a normal construct. You and I have spent most of our lives in the product world.
Yeah.
There's a normal construct where you start to think about segmentation, the classic enterprise, mid-market, SMB space. But if you double click on the enterprise and large companies, call it 5 to 10,000, even more, there's so many companies. We met with a customer the other day that has a security team of 3, and there's 6,300 people.
Wow.
Right? Because you tend to think about the banks and the insurance companies and the retailers that have a huge investment.
Right.
But there's actually a lot of very sizable companies in terms of employee count that still don't have the budget and the sophistication to be able to handle how to deal with all of this.
Got it. So where does LastPass fit into this ecosystem now, right? Started primarily as a password vault, password manager.
Right.
But you're starting to evolve outside of that. So when you think about where do you position yourself in this evolving, consolidating market, where do you see yourselves fitting in the broader industry now?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying at the top of the market, I think the large vendors have largely got it right. I think their strategy of consolidation by both building, bolting on, acquiring, and integrating makes a ton of sense, especially for the large end of the enterprise. And I would also say, even if you look up and down the market stack, most companies now have rooted solid footing with an IDP vendor of choice.
Right.
And the answer depends on kind of where you are. At the higher end of the market, you tend to use maybe an Okta. You go mid-market with Microsoft with their EX purchasing license power. You'll see them come down to SMB mid-market, but Microsoft, as we all know, has started to make strides up and down the stack. So normally when we work with customers, they've already selected an IDP.
Got it.
That means they have integration into their SSO framework, they're proxying their applications, and they're doing it for a core set of apps. What we've noticed and where the opportunity is that there's a cadre of ever increasing applications that people are using that for a variety of reasons aren't being integrated, whether it's the SSO tax, or the technical limitations, sometimes the cost limitations, or oftentimes time, meaning that the number of applications that people are swiping the card for and onboarding outstrips the capacity with which to get visibility and implement the applications into the SSO framework.
Got it.
And so we see a huge opportunity there. And about a year ago, we took the time, we have over 100,000 B2B customers, and we took the time to double click and do some surveys and spend time with them and ask them, what are you actually using the capabilities for? More often than not, it's these services and applications that are not within the SSO framework for the aforementioned reasons, which creates a huge, both a point of pain, risk, and lack of visibility, but also an opportunity.
So it's kind of the unmanaged application authentication mechanism, right?
Correct.
Like,
Correct.
so if you're using your IDP and you're integrated into your SSO, you have visibility, you have control.
You have everything
see
you
it all.
need. Yeah, you have a lot of what you need.
But then you have all these, for lack of a better term, unmanaged applications.
Correct. Shadow IT, shadow AI, we are at RSA, so we've got to talk about all the buzzwords, right? So these kinds of things that have been known for a while, the rapid rate of ascension and adoption is increasing. And what used to be applications that are used by IT, now we notice, and by the way, we're at that almost 1,000 employees, we see it within our organization. Almost every organization has this pent up demand for these applications that they're saying, wait, finance needs a bunch of applications.
Right.
And so every single group is putting pressure on this organization. And the area that we've sort of carved out is how do we provide very quick visibility into that and then be able to provide visibility into what those applications are, understand what the authentication workflow looks like from passwordless authentication to traditional username and passwords. What are the policies associated with it? And eventually, how do we create policy constructs?
Got it. So when you think about the gap is the unmanaged application, but how do you start to provide the visibility?
Yeah.
Is it looking across the different password, who's using certain applications and understanding concentrations of who's using what apps, and then trying to figure out how to group them and get better visibility into that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. This week we recently just announced this topic around secure access experiences, which uses the heritage and strength that we had as a password management capability, and then extended that to provide visibility. It turns out that the privileged position of having a plugin in the browser sits in the flow of all web traffic.
Right.
So if you have that kind of capability, we've recently extended that capability technically to now provide full visibility. So now I can not only have policies about what types of passwords I can use or enforcing multi-factor authentication, but more importantly, I can now give you full visibility into which applications that you're using that are not within your SSO construct.
Right.
So suddenly I can light up the board and tell you, wait a minute, this business is using 139 applications that are not integrated in SSO. This is the users that are using them. This is the frequency of utilization.
Right.
And that provides three really important business value. There's, of course, the security value.
Right.
Visibility gives you the ability to understand, am I accessing a non-sanctioned app? There's the business value, which is to say, I'm a user and the corporate application sanction for program management is Monday.com, but a bunch of people start swiping the credit card for Rike. And I want to be able to control and say, wait a minute, Rike is our normal app, or Monday is our normal application. And then thirdly is the economic one. We started to see this, of course, post-COVID. People started slashing SaaS spending, but they never were able to correlate utilization very, very quickly with licenses purchased.
Oh, interesting.
So now you can use that data to marry it up with the number of applications and the frequency with which people are using. So that application visibility unlocks a treasure trove of value across multiple dimensions.
Yeah, because one, it prevents sprawl of applications you don't necessarily want in the environment because they're not sanctioned. And hey, by the way, we're already paying for Monday.com, so why not just use what we've already approved because we've selected that. But then on top of that, it's the ability to monitor how many people are using it to make sure that your licenses are right sized, because who wants to overpay for licenses in this day? So some interesting use cases, and that's all coming from the browser plugin.
The browser plugin, the extension. Yeah, that capability turns out, but again, the privilege of the position that you sit in across multiple browsers and operating system, you leverage that matrix and footprint to provide services. And you can imagine, that there'll be other capabilities that we can integrate into that as well.
Right, because now I think, so now I see all this application, I see all the users accessing it, I can get visibility into it. Now can I start doing some detection and response capabilities or some policy enforcement capabilities?
Well, you can define a policy, then enforce the policy, and you can, and we'll start announcing these things in the back half of the year that's currently being built. Policy takes on a different form. Some policies are outright blocks. Other policies are, wait a minute, I'm going to pop up a note that says, this is not a sanctioned application for the business.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Are you sure you want to do this? That's exactly right. And a really important piece is, again, by virtue of where we sit, we can not only see the access mode or the access to the application, we can see the mode. So now I can also say, wait a minute, which applications are actually using SSO to sign in? Which ones are using usernames and passwords? Are those usernames and passwords complying from a strength perspective?
Are
they being vaulted? Am I using MFA?
Right.
All within a single capability.
Yeah. So that's interesting. That's a very interesting bridge, right? Is now you see that for all of your unmanaged apps.
That's right.
Where the SSO players can't see that because they're not in their environment.
Not integrated, and they're not in that flow. And the best part is, honestly, without deploying an agent. Because this is the other thing we heard from customers. There's so much agent fatigue, right? And I mean, this has been a decade plus problem in the security industry.
Easily.
Yeah.
Right? We went through this big ramp up of agents, then everybody got tired of agents, and then we saw a ramp up with the EDR products. We saw agents again popping back up. But again, I'm seeing consolidation, right? So clients are trying to figure out how to do more with less. They don't want to manage multiple agents, so they'll throw another agent on the box. Plus, look, an agent on the operating system is not really going to help you anyways in this particular case, right?
That's right.
Being in the browser is different. We were talking earlier with somebody in the browser space. Unmanaged browsers is a gap.
Yeah.
Unmanaged applications through unmanaged browsers are even a bigger gap.
That's right, because there are more of them.
Yes, there's more of them.
There's thousands and thousands of them, right? I mean, inventories have 6,000 to 8,000 in catalogs to be able to really give people a perspective of what we're talking about. The other thing that we found that was kind of interesting in the research was the user capability and the experience aspect. Identity, I mean, there are 2,000 to 3,000 vendors here.
Yeah.
The user experience, or the number of security technologies that the user interfaces in the security space is tiny.
Yeah.
Identity is one of the sole categories that's front and center to the user.
Yeah.
So trying to balance and get the capabilities that you service and push forward in front of the end user, right, and as transparent and easy to use as possible is paramount to getting the identity, getting the users to buy into the consolidation.
Yeah.
In theory, look, what do we know? We know administrators have been dealing with crappy interfaces
for a long time.
And, and yes, we all make better versions of it, but, they are what they are. But the user, that if you want them to come along for the ride and have maximum adoption, you got to make it as simple and least intrusive as possible.
Yeah, it's all about friction, right? You got to remove as much friction out of the equation or it won't get used. And then these unmanaged applications, you don't get control over them.
That's right.
Right? And that's the challenge. I always said app user data, right? In the application, that the unmanaged applications are the ones, because there's thousands, tens of thousands of them all over the place.
They are.
Because if you think we have 4,000 security vendors, think about all the other technologies out there that all get access pretty much through a browser these days.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, the other piece of interesting research that we found was getting back to the sort of like what's the business value.
Yeah.
It's not just making sure that people aren't sanctioned applications. I bring up the Reich and Monday example because this was an example brought forward by a customer,
right,
where they said, we've got multiple applications in a particular domain, and the real impediment to productivity is people use that, then they output the data into whatever format that platform uses.
Yeah.
And now we go to different meetings that has different format, and people that are processing the data are saying, wait a minute, we haven't standardized on an application for project management, so now I have to orient the application that the person is using with the data that they're presenting, which is an impediment to productivity and consistency.
Right.
So there's that visibility in what you can actually do with it in terms of ascribing business value is just multidimensional, all rooted in the identity of the user and the applications that they're accessing.
Yeah. Visibility most people don't have.
Yep. Not in an easy way.
Karim, thank you very much.
Yep.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/LastPass RSAC. Karim, always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, man.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We are broadcasting here at the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley, which is Moscone West. I'm co-host of Paul Security Weekly, Jeff Mann, and I am joined for this interview by a gentleman named Gal Elbaz. He is co-founder and CTO of a company called Oligo Security. Welcome, Gal.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into cybersecurity.
Yeah, so I actually started my career at Checkpoint.
Okay.
Was there for almost a decade.
Wow.
My job was to find vulnerabilities both in our products and help work with developers and fight with developers. Again, depends on which day, but most of my job was involved around finding the biggest 0 days and the biggest applications in the world and go lecture about it. So this is how I got into security, and this is actually what led me to come up with Oligo. So I'll tell it in a second.
Oh yeah, what did make you decide to come up with Oligo?
Yeah, so I just look cool. I'm a nerd, and like one of the projects I did at Checkpoint, I hacked Instagram because their Instagram. And all I needed was just one vulnerability in one open source package. In the beginning, I thought, it's only one vulnerability in one package. There's literally tens of thousands of open sources only in Instagram. Like, how much damage can be done, right?
Right.
But the moment that we can actually run code, we're like, wait, all we need is just one vulnerability in one package, and we're taking down one of the biggest infrastructures in the world, right? Like this photo sharing library, and all we needed to do is just sending you one image in order to completely take over. And like this really made us like to rethink how we look in this whole situation. Like we've been dealing with like, vulnerability research and hunting for our whole life, right? The co-founders. And suddenly we understood like, wow, there's so much money invested in trying to secure application from just scanning the code, right? But it just became too much, like more code and more vulnerabilities, like an endless a chase you cannot really win, right? And trying to patch everything. But when you look at it from like, runtime, actually protecting applications, both like, the legacy approaches, like from the network level or like on the host, we're not really capable of dealing with up-level attacks, right? Or up-level threats. And like this really, made us rethink, wow, like maybe there should be something different or a new approach, not only looking for symptoms or cause, like looking for the cause of the attack and not only the symptom and how we can actually see inside. And like, I think this really, was for us like this pivotal moment that we just decided to leave everything, start building the technology. And I think it was like a year before Log4Shell happened. I think that was our, not just another vulnerability, but just our wake-up call, right?
Right. Well, that was certainly an industry wake-up call. And as you said, it sort of illustrated or brought to light that there's most software these days, most applications are built on layer upon layer upon layer of inherited libraries and APIs and open source and closed source, and God knows where it's coming from. And the traditional defenses of code review, security application assessment just wasn't cutting it. I play in the world of PCI in the daytime, so those are requirements, primarily for web applications, is to do code reviews before it gets pushed out to production, as well as doing some. Used to be you had the choice of a security assessment or protect yourself behind a web application firewall. Now you have to do both in version 4. So, what I'm hearing you saying is you were discovering those two things alone don't cut it.
Yeah, definitely. And like you're starting right to the point, because like when you look at it from the WAF angle, like I grew up in Czech, right? I know network security, but like WAF was an amazing invention that created another layer of mitigation on the network layer, right? But the stuff that are like, again, breaches are still happening, right? I think even a few days ago, Mandiant and Verizon, the latest threat report showed that like it's the first time that like vulnerability exploitation became the number one attack vector for organization, exceeding the email phishing campaigns. And I think what we saw, and like, a few years ago, it's like this trend that like, wow, it's became a lot easier to attack applications.
Right.
Attackers are operating within the app itself. And this is where like WAF is creating a amazing a layer on the network, but if it arrives the host, like it means it bypasses the WAF, right?
Right.
And when we're talking about like protecting the workload itself, of course, all of those great approaches like cloud workload protection or like anything that we started doing like years ago, now has really changed. We're moving to the cloud, distributed application, the attacks are becoming much more complex. And this is, again, all of those approaches existed when Log4Shell happened, right? So what were they? And I think this was our pivotal moment to see like, wow, no one actually looking inside the app or just looking from the outside, whether from the network or from the host layer. But in order to really catch the attackers, you need to be where they're playing inside the app itself.
Are they really more complex, or are they being more creative and clever and just discovering areas that aren't being monitored or watched?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, right? Also, the awareness, understanding of like, vulnerabilities or zero days, like a weapon, in this modern era.
Right.
But as you mentioned earlier, like the software stack became a lot more complex, right? When we're talking about Log4Shell, it's a problem coming and originating from your repos, right? One might think, but when the exit backdoor happened, it was coming through the infrastructure itself, right?
Right.
Or when we talk about Log4Shell as an example, everyone was going and looking for the repos, but wait, what about the applications you bought
Right.
or you deployed? They also have those problems, right? Even if you can't patch them, it doesn't mean they don't have those problems as well. So this, I think, was like combination of both. Like it made it like even a lot bigger problem that we have been.
So you started a company and you sort of came up with a terminology or a name for a new approach. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when we started Oligo, like what we basically have done, like we invented a new technology when we call the deep app inspection. Basically what it allows us is to monitor application without the need to access the source code.
Okay.
And it allows us to solve a decade-long problem which like RASP solution tried but was really intrusive and wasn't really scalable and deployable. So we had to come up with something which is like non-intrusive by design but can see deep enough in order to deal with those. And this is what we call the deep app inspection that allowed us first to see the true risks, what's happening inside the application, and tell you the exploitability part of your CVEs. Yeah, you have a CVE, but it's a theoretical finding. Now we're adding the real context, like is it running or running the vulnerable function? Like, and with that, helping the team identify the true risk. But when we're talking about what the ADR or CADR actually means, is this revolution that like, hey, we can finally see inside the app layer. And we can detect or prevent attacks by this unique ability, not only to look inside the application, but to now being able to look at a specific code component and understand what this piece of code starts to deviate. So actually, we're very fortunate to work with the people that invented and wrote the Windows Defender in the last 20 years, one of the most prominent runtime tools. It was invented for the laptops, right, for the endpoints.
Sure.
And when we talked about like what we're doing inside the cloud app applications, like one of them actually mentioned, he said, hey, like what you guys cracked, it's not only just like seeing what's a library is doing or what it shouldn't do. Now just add the whole context of an EDR, like whether it's talking to IP and if this IP is malicious. And what you guys cracked is the first ability to monitor what's happening inside the application, inside the processes. This is where he helped us name it like an ADR, like stands for the app, not only for the endpoint or the host, as we all knew up until now.
So I'm curious, is your product, are you marketing it more to security teams at organizations or developers or both?
Great question. So like we look at it like as a platform that can also help like with multi-posture. We're not also like the first company that can show you code in runtime, your usual SCA funding and code scanning. Now you can actually see the runtime representation of them and help you to fix your developer issues. But hey, we're on a runtime, so we can also help you with your container security issues and help your DevOps to do the base OS upgrade or like the ability to understand its container risk. But hey, we also monitor any piece of software, right? We don't care if you built it, bought it, deployed it, or even stole it, right? And that means we can actually help you on your third-party software, your Grafanas, your Argo CD, something you actually deploy from the internet and should get an upgrade. So like in that manner, we see ourselves really helping like different personas. We talked a little bit about PCI or compliance.
I was going to say, you're hitting a trigger for PCI.
Exactly, because like we don't only look at like those representation of code components in runtime, but we also give the full aspect of their inherited risk, not only CVEs and vulnerabilities, but also the license of them or the legal aspect of them, right? Are you abusing some license that you shouldn't? Or like you have to comply to some regulation, you need to build a full software inventory like the ASW regulation or VAX. So I think those stuff really helped us to help organization, with their initiatives or like, getting into where they want to be with FedRAMP or really tapping into that, but like harnessing the power of what we've done.
Well, now that PCI 4.01 is fully in effect, I, as an assessor, I'm going in and talking to clients and I'm starting to ask for the evidence to meet the requirement. It happens to be 6.3.2. And technically it doesn't say SBOM, but what it says is you need to have an inventory of all your system and system components. Application components of any customer bespoke software that you've built, and demonstrate that you're using that information you're collecting to find and fix vulnerabilities. A little bit of a paraphrase, but it sounds like you can address that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the industry started like giving it like the right names, right? The SBOM was the software bill of materials, right? Something we took from the industrial, right? Like when you have a huge machine and you need to understand when one thing is not working, how you can actually replace it on the same essence. We're building an amazing application, but they're built on different layers of code, right? And that was the first layer of it, like just having the full software components inventory. But then, like when we started talking about risk or communicating risk, this is where the VEX format, just taking the ASBOM and adding the exploitability part on top of each and every package. Does it have a CVE, but this CVE applies or doesn't apply? It's actually creating a real risk. And I think those stuff really help vendors and big companies communicate this risk in a lot easier, scalable way.
We're at the very beginning of the conference this week, and I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of people. The vendor floor is not open yet, but CVE has been kind of in the news in the last week or two. But on our show, on Paul's Security Weekly, we've been talking about CVEs for months because Paul, the guy that is the main host, he works for a company that part of their job is discovering vulnerabilities. And he's finding, through experience, not all vulnerabilities that are discovered get a CVE. Some CVEs are a little bit distracting. Sometimes there's more than one company that's claiming the CVE. Who decides when a CVE is issued is a little bit up in the air. They actually had an instance where they discovered a vulnerability, gave it to the vendor. The vendor just fixed it with an upgrade, but didn't bother to issue a CVE. And we're all like, what's going on here? The whole, not the industry, but the consumer side of this industry is very much entrenched and trained to jump when there's a CVE, but there's more than just CVEs, and there's more issues than get reported on CVE. How do you and your platform convince your clients, no, this really is a problem, whether it's a CVE or not?
Yeah, so that's amazing actually, because it's exactly touching the point that we want to solve, right? Because the ADR piece of what we've done is like the ability to detect threats on the up level.
And that's application detection and response.
Yeah. When we add the CADR, it means like we're building the full aspect of like, hey, we can like attackers. The first front that attackers are facing is the app itself. Right. This is the way to get the initial access to breach the organization through the app.
Right.
But then, of course, attackers want to propagate to the workload or to the cloud. So we believe that the same revolution that happened like with the antiviruses and the EDR, when there was like something good happening, but someone came and did the next evolution of it, and in the end, like from augmenting like to totally replacing. We think and we believe that the same revolution should happen to cloud applications, and it should start with the app layer, because this is the missing layer and the most important layer.
Right.
And when we're talking about CVEs, actually it is something really close to our heart, right? And CVEs are meant, and their whole purpose was to help vendors or help the world understand where the issue is, and what's the real risk and how should I fix it, right? There's a reason for that, like you said. So it doesn't help to fix an issue but not notifying like the users about the real risk, so they can actually know and go and patch, right? And we did something really really cool in Oligo. Actually, we have one of the best threat research team in the globe, and we've been conducting like vulnerability research and hunting, and one day we actually encountered something like you mentioned, like what we call a shadow vulnerability. Basically, it's those CVEs that doesn't get
the attention,
the attention or the real numeric number in order to help users identify them. And those are problems that are happening because like the maintainers decided like to dispute it, and they decide, right, they're the maintainers, this is the open source world, or again, there was just like a disagreement about the real impact or the risk, right? Or just like it's an insecure by design library and the developer did a mistake when, again, those stuff happen. And we did a whole talk at DEF CON about it, about this concept, that what was really striking in the same year, we found like a very, like we're nerds, like we're AI nerds, and we were using a famous framework called Ray. Ray, it's basically Kubernetes for AI.
Yep.
GPT was trained on Ray, made by the amazing Anyscale company. And we saw there were like 5 vulnerabilities that's been disclosed and were disputed by the maintainer. And one of them was like a vicious RCE, like, running code and like the maintainer, hey, this is the intended behavior of it.
Right.
And when we looked
I hate to cut you
yeah.
off, but we're actually out of time.
Oh, wow.
We could keep going, obviously,
Yeah.
and you're very passionate about
Yeah.
this. If you guys have captured that passion and are interested and want to get more information, you can go to securityweekly.com/Oligo RSAC. And for all information about our coverage, go to Cyber Risk Alliance. For all of Cyber Risk Alliance coverage, securityweekly.com/RSAC. Gal, thanks again for joining us today.